Hi again. We're still talking about yurt, its origin, its design, its evolution, its how it's made, its design and purposes, and also all the things surrounding a yurt. Because yurt is not just a thing in itself; it's embedded in the nomadic lifestyle. It's part of this civilization, of this culture, of this economy, and technologically and as a lifestyle feature, it's designed to fit perfectly within this lifestyle. Now, in this particular video, we will talk about and nomadic transportation because really one is impossible without another. Yurt is only meaningful when it works, when it's movable, when it's transported, because that's the sole reason for its existence. It's designed to be light. It's designed to be collapsible, foldable, and movable, and so that it could be raised in any location, in any desired location. So let's talk about transportation here. Like I said earlier, this is not often mentioned. Usually, the focus is on is on yurts, is on the yurt itself. But what about transportation? How it's been carried from side to side, and we have a very rich tradition here. It's actually just as interesting as the yurt itself, and we have to study it more carefully, I think. So let's take a look at nomadic portable dwellings first. In the left, we can see in the left frame we can see early Saka Scythian designs of portable dwellings. We know them thanks to a few depictions, and most importantly, we have these surviving clay models, and even surviving carts themselves, wooden carts that survived millennia because they were buried in tombs. And we can see I picked three most common types here. The one on the left is a cart with a tent-like structure on top of it. The one in the middle shows a wagon type, very similar to any wagon known to humanity, 4 wheels, this semi-barrel shaped cover. And the one on the right is again a cart with a tent-like structure on top of it, and it has these giant spiked wheels, and they're so high that they could be higher than a person. And that's another design, maybe it appeared later, that became also kind of a iconic type of wheel for certain nomadic groups, and some of them were even mentioned in historical sources as nomads with carts with large wheels. So that's early nomads here, late Bronze Age and early Iron Age. Now, in medieval times, I already shown this design. It evolved into this round, pretty much yurt-shaped structure sitting on top of now two-wheeled carts, and is being pulled by a horse. So that's talking about portable dwellings. And as I mentioned earlier, perhaps maybe this was the the origin of yurt. Maybe we don't know, the portable dwellings actually precede the appearance of mobile yurts. I think this is something we need to find out more about. And now, skipping forward to 18th and 20th century in Central Asia and Kazakhstan, the nomadic transportation, we have actual photographs showing these designs. And we know exactly the shapes, we can count the amount of spikes that were used, calculate the diameter, and etc. See how it's built. So this is a very good source for us, source of information for us, and it's well documented. So it's a very valuable source. And if we look at these pictures and my illustrations below, one thing that is really striking me when I look at this is that if you notice the design of wheels and spikes and axes and etc., and the cart itself and the cover pretty much didn't change at all from Bronze Age to early 20th century. It means that it was so good, it was so well, it was optimal that it survived all these millennia and arrived in the 20th century pretty much unchanged. And this is just fascinating how well it was conceived and designed originally, that it didn't have to be changed until the modern era. I mean, how many things do we know that existed for so long without this little change? And this is something that at the time of conception was high-tech technology, high-end technology. And the fact that nomads invented wheel and started using it first and then introduced it to all settled civilizations, settled nations, is also fascinating, because usually the perception of nomads is wild and barbaric and redundant, and that they did not invent but only steal and took everything by force. But in reality, it's a complete different story, because we now know that wheeled transport was invented by nomads. This is a fact. It's an archaeological fact. You can double check. So all the wheeled transport we use today, we owe it to the nomads. And yet we call them barbarians and destroyers and bloodthirsty and etc. and etc. Moving on to the next section is the use of camels, and not only camels but predominantly camels as a life transportation sort of. So the pictures and photographs on top show type of camel transportation when loads and cargo are loaded directly on a camel back. This is probably the simplest transportation, also the fastest and the most it can go through pretty much any terrain, so it's the most off-road ready solution. And as you can see, they load the shanrak, they load kerge, they can load wuks, and very often they load their chests, and they let children sit in these chests. If there are a few children, they can sit on each side. So it's kind of like sitting in a vehicle and looking outside uh, how the whole caravan is moving, but the kids are sitting on the inside of these chests looking out, and it's just I've heard description that it was a lot of fun. Kids just really enjoyed this type of transportation. And on the bottom, it's just regular Traverse type of transportation, when it's a very simple system. Two poles are attached to camel, and then they're tied together, uh, connected together with wood pieces or a net or something, and then they just load uh, the cargo on top of it, and then a camel just can drag it. If the terrain is grassy, this could be very easy way for a camel to move, because dragging is easier obviously than carrying, and then a person can sit on top of it. So these are just two modes of camel transportation. Now finally, I want to talk about one of my favorite and most fascinating type of nomadic transportation, which is a mobile nomadic camp. And what it was is they that this is the apex of nomadic civilization we're talking about, somewhere in the Middle Ages, something that culminated in creation of the so-called Mongol Empire, the Golden Horde, and etc. And back then, we have descriptions of yurts or gers that were put on top of wheeled platforms. And these are not these small proto yurt types we're talking about. These are full-blown, full-scale yurts that were put on these huge platforms with wheels, and they were so big they had to use a large amount of oxen to drag them, because it was heavy obviously. And we have these depictions, and this is my reconstruction of it, that shows sort of a mid-size yurt being put on the top of mid-size platform and being dragged by oxen, and a warrior is moving along on a guard. He's guarding it. But this image is kind of blowing me away, because when I imagine how it really was in reality, and we have descriptions, by the way, that nomads at the apex of the nomadic civilization used to travel in style. The contemporary authors describe entire cities of these mobile yurts being dragged by their oxen on these platforms, and they were brightly colored and beautiful, very well decorated, with warriors and guards moving along, and large herds of animals. And we can easily imagine how it was, and it's a telling image, because it shows that in the native environment, this kind of cities and the nomads, they just didn't have any natural enemies. They were completely at home in their natural habitat, and they had these beautiful mobile cities traveling from place to place. And at the same time, the beauty of it is that they didn't cause any permanent damage to the environment. Quite the opposite, because they move their large herds of livestock, and we're talking about dozens or maybe hundreds of thousands of heads of various livestock, and all of these livestock produced droppings and urine, and also their hoofs, uh, treating it in a way that allowed for much better vegetation. And more vegetation means because the soil gets fertilized every year by passing herds, and the vegetation becomes very lavish and lush, and then it produces oxygen. Oxygen produces water, and etc. So the nomadic lifestyle, these traveling cities, not only didn't disturb nature, they actually improved the nature. They helped turning deserts into steppes, into plains, and plains covered with grass and occasional trees and occasional little forests. So these cities were part of the ecosystem of Eurasia, helping to keep it much healthier. And even the geographers and travelers that sort of caught the last glimpse on this disappearing civilization in 18th, 19th, 20th centuries, they said that nomads are part of the ecosystem, and that turning the nomads into settled, forcing them to quit their nomadic lifestyle would disrupt this natural cycle, and it would turn the green steppes and plains into deserts. And that's exactly what happened, because from political point of view, the nomadism, the nomadic civilization was considered undesirable form of existence, and when the nomadic states lost their independency and were conquered by their neighbors, by their settled neighbors, the settled neighbors made efforts to stop and completely eradicate nomadic civilization, and that led to desertifications all over Eurasia. So where the nomads used to roam and fertilize these lands with their livestock, now nobody does that, and they just lay completely deserted, dry, and there's just very little life there. But back in the day, we're talking about Middle Ages, the apex of nomadic civilization. It was a completely different picture. It was beautiful. It was green. It was colorful. All these cities moving across these meadows of wild grass with their livestock, and it was just very, very beautiful. So I want you to remember this image. And next time, when you see another stereotypical representation of nomads as, wild barbarians, just burning cities and destroying and burning and pillaging, remember this picture, please, and hopefully it will act as a counterweight to this common misconception about the nomads. And this is it for this section. We will be talking more about yurts and nomadic lifestyle in the following sections. Thank you for staying with me. See you soon.